Kentucky has always been a special place. In the quiet hills of northeast Kentucky, life in the 1930s and 40s resembled the early depictions that we still hear about today. One-room schoolhouses were common. Picnics were not only common but encouraged. Congregations of the faithful would gather on riverbanks to watch baptisms. You may even see advertising on the sides of many of the barns in the area. You'd be surrounded by the beauty of rolling hills, vast farmlands, all surrounded by the thick northeast Kentucky forest where wildlife is abundant. Nearly all northeast Kentucky residents were farmers in the 1930s and 40s, and the lucky ones may be able to make a living raising livestock or perhaps have been able to find their way to a school of teaching. When Pearlie Mae Bush was born in 1937 to Frances Marion and Sarah Ellen Bush, she was immediately immersed in the lifestyle that most young people in northeast Kentucky would live, seeing farmlands, playing in nearby creeks and streams, dropping a line in the water to try to catch fish for supper. Pearlie Mae, being the youngest of 9, grew up in a loving family with hard work ethic and values that were common in Greenup County, Kentucky at the time. Pearlie Mae's early life would resemble the lives of most young people in northeast Kentucky, surrounded by love, hard work, good morals, and values. It would have been an impossible thought for a young Pearlie Mae Bush to see her future self shot to death. In September 1958, in a year when summer held its grip on northeast Kentucky a little longer than normal, everything was still lush and green and colorful, a perfect day for a picnic, especially for a traveling evangelist who had made his way from Ashland, Kentucky, over to Fleming County. The minister, who was traveling with 3 women in his party, looked for the perfect place to enjoy lunch after church services had concluded. He saw a beautiful and inviting place at the intersection of Musis Mill and Plummer's Landing Road, a place where the party could unwind and enjoy a picnic lunch. As the group finished their lunch, one of the women spotted a beautiful apple tree. The apples were too enticing to ignore, so she decided to make her way over to the beckoning apple tree. As she was climbing the knoll towards the tree, her foot felt a mushy resistance. Knowing this was no ordinary object that she had stepped on, her curiosity compelled her to part the weeds to the side to reveal the source of her unstable footing. The peace and tranquility of that northeast Kentucky day was pierced as the woman screamed. The minister rushed to her. It was there that he found the mutilated body of a decomposing woman clutching a bedsheet. The minister motioned the other women in the party to stay away, said a silent prayer, and helped the shaken woman to the car. He found the nearest telephone and called the authorities. The first on the scene was Sheriff Robert Stokely. He took care in studying the scene but quickly arrived at the conclusion that this was indeed a homicide, and the person here was murdered. He knew that a proper exam needed to be completed, but of course he needed to get the victim out of this field. Sheriff Stokely found no visible signs of evidence or prints. The only footprints were from the minister and his party. 2 Kentucky State Troopers arrived at the scene, but they would find no evidence either. It was clear that too much time had passed. Coroner Gano Hawkins would arrive at the scene next. He confirmed homicide as well and said she had been dead about 3 days. Coroner Hawkins had 38 years of experience and was still working at a funeral home in Elizaville, Kentucky. Police surveyed the area and found no blood leading to the crime scene. Whoever killed this person didn't bring the body here. They got them to walk here. Funeral workers arrived and removed the body while officers were still investigating. Sheriff Stokely told Coroner Hawkins to find any identifying marks on her body and examine the clothing. The coroner pointed out rings and a wristwatch and said, "I'll get everything to you." The body was taken to a mortuary storage garage in small Ewing, Kentucky, about 7 miles north of Flemingsburg. It was placed in a vault and covered with a preservation solution. The body, which was identified as female at this point, floated in the solution, so weights would have to be attached. The coroner made it known that he would lift the body out for anybody who wanted to view it for identification. The clothing and all her effects were turned over. The coroner determined that she was shot in the left temple, the projectile traveling down her neck and lodging in her body. She was 5'4", 115 pounds with blonde hair and blue eyes. Her description, evidence description, and facts were all sent to local newspapers and radio stations. She was wearing a class ring which was engraved MHS, class of 47, which based on that would place her around 30 years old. Pinned to her brassiere was $18. However, the most mystifying was her clutching the bedsheet, which just didn't fit with someone who was killed out in the country. Investigators tracked down the manufacturer of the class ring and sent it to them. A local jeweler looked at the watch, but there were no real leads. Many people came to view the body, scared that it was their missing loved ones. Even those with a morbid curiosity were not turned down. There were no reported missing persons that fit that description. Additional officers would be assigned. Then came a possible break in the case. The class ring manufacturer was able to identify the ring to the Ohio Soldiers and Sailors Orphans Home. Every member of the class of 47 was given a ring. Lieutenant Howard from the Moorhead, Kentucky Post of the Kentucky State Police called the authorities in that city to get the school records and find as many graduates as possible. The next break would be most unexpected. All of the rings were accounted for except one. The ring belonging to Mrs. Louise Blackstone had been missing for years. She was startled when the police questioned her about it. She states that her former husband took it when the divorce was finalized and he was living in Vanceburg, Kentucky. The Vanceburg police questioned him. He denied taking it. He said he never had it. He went with the police to the station in Vanceburg and actually drove him to see the body. Never saw her, he said, denying any involvement. The only thing he remotely admitted was that it may have been taken in a box of things that he took. He even agreed to a lie detector test and was taken to the state capital, Frankfort, Kentucky, to have it administered. It was determined that he was telling the truth. As the class ring clue faded, another unexpected clue came. The wristwatch manufacturer stated that the watch was shipped to a store in Albany, Kentucky, and it was stolen by thieves in a nighttime burglary. Northeast Kentucky had been startled by a series of small thefts in recent months, and police were having no luck finding the perpetrators. Lieutenant Howard made the suggestion that she could have been a part of the gang and hiding out. Sheriff Stokely would exclaim, "That still doesn't explain the bed sheets." Weeks had passed and the trail was getting cold, and after another week, even colder. The investigation was still intense and the stream of visitors to view the body was growing. After 3 weeks had passed, 3,500 people had viewed the body. There were still repeated requests from the Fleming County Sheriff's Office and the state police for information. State Trooper Estill Coleman in Greenup County, Kentucky, had been diligent in circulating the description in his county. While Trooper Coleman was in the office working on routine reports, the phone rang. He heard a female's voice on the other end of the line say, "It's about the girl they have down at Ewing." Coleman went to the caller's house. Her name was Mrs. Allen. Mrs. Allen would say, "Maybe I'm being foolish, but I can't stop thinking about it." Trooper Coleman encouraged her to go view the body, and if it isn't her, then at least her mind could get some relief. Trooper Coleman would ask, "What makes you think it's your sister?" She softly replied, "The money." The newspaper mentioned $18 pinned to her brassiere. "The last time I saw her, I gave her $18 for babysitting." They arrived at the mortuary at 1:30 a.m. The body was lifted from the solution. She gasped, "That's Pearlie Mae." She broke down. Later she would return with another sister who also confirmed it was Pearlie Mae. Pearlie Mae Bush. Police finally had a name. They found that she had been living with Chad Webb, and Pearlie Mae herself went by Nancy Webb. It was said that Pearlie Mae was a vivacious blonde with a love for life. Police asked the last time Mrs. Allen had seen Pearlie Mae. A few weeks ago, she stopped by with a young couple. I believe their name was Henry. Pearlie said they lived on Muses Mill Road, the same Muses Mill Road where the body was recovered. Authorities combed the neighborhood, and more information was uncovered. Neighbors pointed them towards the house in which they lived. The house was locked, so they obtained a search warrant. There was a neat garden in the back, although it was neglected in recent weeks. An elderly couple that lived nearby said they had recently heard two women screaming. The couple also described the Henrys and said Mrs. Henry had told them that she wished she could go back home to Ironton, Ohio. Armed with the name of Eugene Henry, Ironton Sheriff Carl Rose knew exactly where he was staying in Hanging Rock, Ohio. Wife Mary Henry answered the door, terrified. Police asked if they knew a Chad Webb and Pearlie Mae Bush. Mrs. Henry made an interesting but crucial piece of evidence known. Chad's name was Norris. He just went by Webb. It was an alias, as was the name Nancy Webb that Pearlie Mae used. Did you live with them in Fleming County? Yes. Police then encouraged them to come to the station. They wanted help identifying the body. Eugene Henry refused, stating they already knew who she was. Mrs. Henry went. She refused to look at the body but identified the clothes. She went through lengthy questioning, but authorities were stumped with her evasive answers. Mrs. Henry would go on to say that Chad Norris offered her husband a job as a caretaker of his home for $25 to $30 a week. Mr. Henry, who had had 2 stints in the state penitentiary, told his wife that he wanted to leave his life of crime behind. So he told her that he was getting a job with Norris to look after his place and to grow a garden. Mrs. Henry would further tell police that Pearlie Mae and Chad Norris would go on long drives at night, and sometimes her husband would go with them. Well, where did they go? They wouldn't tell me. And what happened to Pearlie Mae and Norris? I don't know, they went away someplace. The emotional strain was taking its toll on Mrs. Henry. She stayed there all night, and around noon the jailer saw her in obvious distress. Reporters had gathered, knowing that someone was being questioned. The jailer said, "Why don't you talk about it? You'll feel better." She cried out, "I want to talk." The county attorney was called in, and Mrs. Henry began talking more. "My husband promised me that he would go straight, but he met his old friend Chad Norris. Chad wanted him to look after his hideout and watch the house, and especially all of the valuables that were being accumulated on his nighttime raids with Pearlie Mae. Mary Henry truly thought it was a legit job, but she started getting suspicious of all the merchandise accumulating in the forbidden room. Curiosity got the best of her when she went in to the room. She realized that this hoard of valuables must be from the many thefts that she kept hearing about in the area. Pearlie Mae caught her in the room and a fight ensued. The men arrived and broke it up, but soon found themselves arguing over a debt that Henry owed Norris. The 2 men would go to Ashland, Kentucky. However, Mr. Henry returned alone. "Where's Chad?" Pearlie Mae asked. "He's been hurt and he needs your help. Hurry, he's cut, he needs bandages, and he's calling for you." This was the last detail that Mrs. Henry knew. Pearlie Mae and Mr. Henry hurriedly left, but not before Pearlie Mae grabbed a bedsheet. Mrs. Henry's clues helped reconstruct the crime scene, and finally the bedsheet made sense. Faced with the evidence, Eugene Edward Henry confessed. Henry and Chad Norris continued their argument about money. Norris began flicking a knife, and in a panic, Henry shot Norris twice in the face. He drove to Olive Hill, Kentucky, and dumped his body in Olive Hill refractories on a slag pile. The body was found exactly where he said it would be. He explained the blood in the car to Pearlie Mae by telling her her boyfriend Norris was injured. He pulled onto Muses Mill Road, where the minister's picnic took place. He told her that Norris was waiting for her up on the hill. He led the way. He turned around when Pearlie Mae's head was level with his coat pocket and shot her before she knew what happened. Eugene Edward Henry must have thought that by eliminating Pearlie Mae Bush, he eliminated the threat of being caught. We are here at the intersection of Muses Mill and Plummer's Landing Road, and it was somewhere near this location that Pearlie Mae Bush lost her life. Mrs. Henry was completely exonerated. We are walking down the road here right off of Laurel Road, and it's strange, you know, kind of walking on the road, the same roads I'm sure that Pearlie Mae would have walked on, and telling her story in a strange way has actually made me feel close to her and, you know, her tragic death. I don't know what she was involved in, but nobody deserved that. So glad to be able to tell her story today. We are in Greenup County, Kentucky, just off of Laurel Road. We have made it to Bush Family Cemetery. We have looked at the life and the death of Pearlie Mae Bush. Now it is time to go to the top of this hill and see if we can locate her final resting place to pay our respects to Pearlie Mae Bush. You know, I found this story all interesting, fascinating, and heartbreaking at the same time. And the reason that I chose to put my focus on Pearlie Mae Bush in this particular situation is Pearlie Mae is actually my wife's family. It is her grandmother's sister. You know, this isn't some story that took place in a faraway land. This is one county over. I'm so glad to be able to tell her story, and like I said, heartbreaking at the same time. You can see, I know we mentioned the class ring business where it appeared that she would have been around 30. Obviously, the class ring wasn't hers. You can tell by the stone, 20, 21 years old, somewhere in that range. She passed away in 1958. Like I mentioned, telling this story definitely made me feel close to her. And I found myself, in telling this story and reading about it, I was absolutely, totally engaged and enthralled the whole time. So I'm honored to tell her story today. I want to thank my wife for taking me up here to this cemetery, showing me where it's at. I want to thank her Uncle Carol, the family historian. I definitely picked his brain and enjoy talking with him and speaking with him about all things history. Another video of mine will be popping on the screen soon. It is my wish that you watch it. Please like and subscribe for similar content. Once again, from Bush Family Cemetery in Greenup County, Kentucky, I will see you again soon.